Thank you, Ken. Today I'd like to address you on the topic of the right to an ordinary life. Before doing so, I'd like to acknowledge that we meet on the land of the Ngunnawal people, the traditional owners of the land, and I'd like to acknowledge and pay my respect to their elders past and present. I'd also like to acknowledge Dr Ken Baker and National Disability Services for organising today's event, and there's a sellout crowd here, and who'd have thought that would have happened with disability, so everyone here is part of, I think, a process of change. I'd also like to acknowledge my Queensland colleague, newly appointed, newly minted Minister for Disability Services amongst a range of other responsibilities, Anastasia Palaszczuk. I'd also like to acknowledge Jeff Harmer and senior representatives of the department which I work for, the Family, Housing, Community Services and Indigenous Affairs. Last month, as Ken has said, my parliamentary duties were expanded and I've been involved in the repair and reconstruction of towns devastated by the bushfires of February the 7th. We all know what a horrible, horrific day that was and what it eventually meant, and in fact what it told us of the Australian capacity for doing and giving. The ceaseless hours, working through days of grief and fear, fatigue, flames, smoke and appalling devastation. The respect and care for people we love and care for, live and work with. This unique spirit and ethos which historians have written about us for more than a century, but its real meaning, I understand, can only be properly understood and felt on the ground. So today I want to talk of another group of Australians. Australians with the same ilk of courage, spirit and ethos, whose circumstances are vastly different from most, whose days and nights are a mighty struggle to achieve capacity and independence that others of us have never once wondered about and always presumed to be available. Australians who speak clearly and strongly to themselves, or they simply wouldn't survive, but whose voices are rarely heard by the broader many who live in their midst and otherwise occupy this nation. I'm talking of a silent, aching effort, ever infused by love, affecting millions of lives, which falls mostly under the radar. It happens daily, quietly and inexorably, and has been going on for too many years to know or count. It is invisible, or at least so accepted and entrenched in our society that we fail to see its most fundamental infringement of human rights and dignity. I'm talking of young men and women with lifelong disabilities living in aged care homes, living with people in their later years, nearing the end of their lives, people they are unable to connect with and share experiences with, all because they have no other choices available to them. I'm speaking of ageing parents and carers looking after an adult child for as long as they can, forever anxious and haunted by the thought of what will happen to their son or daughter when they die or when they're no longer able to give them the constant attention and support that they need. Couples have had too little sleep for too long, whose marriages collapse from the physical and emotional stress of constantly caring for a child with disability with little help. I speak of people with a disability who are able and keen to work, but they can't because some of us aren't prepared. Some of us, some amongst us, are not prepared to see the value of their contribution. Rather, we're worried about what they might cost us. I'm talking of wonderful parents who love without question, people who prevail, not simply endure. I'm talking of the quest by people with disability, their families and supported by professional carers to live ordinary lives. Now, there are good things that the Rudd government has already commenced, led by my senior minister Jenny Macklin, which we are doing in disability. And we have put together an agreement with the states which will improve the situation of disability funding to a point. We're beginning at last the slow task of untangling the bureaucratic, crazy maze the parents go through when they seek help for their children. We are developing a national disability strategy and a workforce strategy aimed at getting people with disabilities jobs. We've rolled out 250 new places in Australian disability enterprises, creating employment opportunities for people with more severe disabilities. I've chaired regular meetings with Australia's top employers to obtain a commitment to improving employment of people with disability. We paid 720,000 DSP recipients and 120,000 carer payment recipients an extra $1,400 if they are single and $1,050 if partnered. Also, 440,000 carer allower recipients received an extra $1,000. We've made it easier for people on the disability pension to look for work without being punished for daring to try and get a job. And with changes from 1 July, we'll be providing carer payment to an extra 19,000 carers of children with disability. We're establishing 6 autism early learning centres and to date have provided early intervention funding to over 1,000 children and families for our new package. We've ratified the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability, one of the first Western countries to do so. We've tabled the draft disability standards for access to premises. Once finalised, these will provide greater certainty to people with a disability as well as industry and will cover new publicly accessible buildings and those that are being significantly upgraded. We've expanded the delivery of individual advocacy services and improved service coverage. My talk is not merely to give you a report on the accomplishments of the Rudd government. What I'd like to do is to emphasise where we go from here and how huge a task it is that we have before us. And I want to say it's a task that can't be solved by funding alone. Because if people with disability to achieve their rightful place in Australian society, it involves a change at the way we look at things, an honest appraisal of ourselves, a fresh approach to how we treat other people, a deeper understanding of what it is to be part of humanity. It involves what T.S. Eliot called visions and revisions. It is not dissimilar to the one earlier reformers faced when they started to say in meetings that anyone can sit anywhere on the bus, that anyone can use the washroom, that anyone can vote regardless of the colour of their skin. But first, some numbers to show the enormity of what we're dealing with.